Well, hello there. This is Shane from Shane's Reviews. What a day. Hope yours is going well. It was questionable if mine was going to be or not. But anyway, the long and the short is we're finally going to actually discuss Bloodline. I know that I've read it and I kind of glanced over it and I made a shameful video on Brilliance Audio for this. Because the audio is just so bad in this. But this is Bloodline Repairman Jack number 11, which was wrote by F. Paul Wilson and narrated by Dick Hill. Anyway, so first things first. Usually I will say, what about the narrations? Well, Dick Hill himself is an excellent narrator, but he's kind of limited. He's only got so many voices that he uses, so that can be a little bit distracting. The biggest issue that I had with the audio was it was just so bad. And it wasn't his fault. It was the production side of things. It was edited horribly, and there was a lot of points where he will be trying and playing as a narrator will, with either like some guttural noises or doing his best to kind of bring some life into the story. And I appreciate the efforts he was making, but the people that did the editing on that just really did nothing but make it worse. They didn't make any good, and in my humble opinion, they should have just cut the stuff out if they were going to do what they did to it. And I hate it for him because it makes him look bad. But it wasn't Dick Hill at all that was the problem here. It was the production side of things. There are points that it will take you completely out of the story. If you're a listener like myself, I mean, I can read a book, but I don't retain everything whenever I read a book. But if I hear a book, I can retain almost the entire thing. And it was just one of those things where I'm like, my usual listening speed, it's fast, like 1.6, usually somewhere around there, to 2.25, depending upon the speed of the person that is narrating the book. Well, what was happening is I was getting a lot of like left-right type blips, and then also whenever he was making these noises or pausing for effect, that was all getting lost because of the way that things had been cut and edited on the side of the production team, which made it a horrible book to try to listen to. Now, I just want to say shame on you, Brilliance Audio, for doing that. Because that's a really good book, it's a really good story, but if this was the first one that somebody picked up on the Repairman Jack series and they listened to it, I don't think that they would bother listening to anything else that had to do with that, because it would just seem so bad. Now that I got that out of my system, I read the book physically before I forced myself to finally listen through this so that I could get through the last thing, whenever it came to Bloodline. But I want to say this up front. The story is starting to get good. If you can push all that stuff to the side, if you can just deal with it and it's not a big deal for you, that's fine. But for myself, I was over it for 14 hours because I had to listen to it at 1x speed so that all the audio blips didn't keep running my experience. There it is. Now I feel better. All right, so the other question is, though, is the book itself, not the audiobook, because the audiobook is trash, but is the actual physical book for this worth your time, efforts, and energies? And the short answer to that is yes. If you've ever read any of the other Repairman Jack series books, this one is starting to rev things up quite a bit. There is a lot of things going on in this one. There's a lot of backstories and news stories and information that ties into the old stuff. I mean, it's a very lore-rich book. And so I incredibly enjoyed that portion of finding out more stuff about Eldritch gods and the people that were one that was born before all this other stuff had happened and before the adversary was there, and just how they have tied into each other over the course of history, and the scope of the history of which they have been here is absolutely amazing. It really is. As far as like the story between Jack and his love interest Gia, there's some smatterings here or there, but that's always kind of been like a low burning backstory. It's usually not like right up in front. There has been a few books, of course, though, that breaks that exception, which is perfectly fine because the stories revolved around the both of them, and it was good to see. Now, let's get into a little bit about the book. And granted, I've had about a year that I've been paused on it because I just couldn't get past this book. Brilliant. Shame on you. Bloodlines it's kind of an interesting, twisting trailer. There was a lot of the subject matter in this book that I couldn't get behind. And the reason why I really can't get behind it has to do with just people. So essentially, the way this otherness stuff works is, now we have found out in the books, there is ODNA, or other DNA. And there's a couple of different pieces of it. One is a trigger, and one is just the other DNA. If you have the trigger and the DNA, if you get really upset, then it can come out. It does make the people that have it more predetermined towards violence than people that don't have it. So if they get upset, they're going to be more likely to try to fix it with their fist instead of listening to reason and logic and actually making something happen. That would be kind of beneficial to both, maybe not what both wants. And that's the issue with this book, is there is a ghostly kind of a father figure that was connected to one of his sons, and whenever he passed away, then the son stopped being able to feel him, but he was still getting instructions from him, etc. He didn't know where he was at and all that kind of thing. But what he is trying to accomplish, the ghostly father figure, is to purify their bloodline so that they will have the maximum output of this other DNA stuff in it, hopefully giving the harbinger or the bringer or the end of the world as we know it to the baddies. Here's what makes it so hard for me to swallow, is that one of the people that was involved in it ended up having a child through one of the brothers, and it was not something that she wanted. And then the other brother ends up dating this daughter, or is supposed to, and come to find out her father is the one that ends up impregnating her, which is just the weirdest thing. I mean, it's like incest past 5. But their point is they're trying to get the maximum amount that they can out of this ODNA. And this is where things really start to come across weird. So Jack, as he is hired to find out whom this person that her daughter is being with is and all this kind of thing, starts to stumble across things as he usually does, and it makes for a really good, solid story. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Not so much the details of what they had done, but the seeing how everything comes to the head at the end. And it is a very satisfying end for one of them, for sure. It was just kind of neat, all these little details and the way things kept ramping up, and the sub stories and all that. And I feel bad for her in a lot of ways, because she's a very young, very impressionable individual. And I wouldn't really be surprised if she doesn't try to use those young mannerisms or young thought processes to try to get her way in things, and if she's in the next few books. But I do know that she's got a huge desire to either get rid of herself or get rid of the child that she has. She's very upset about the way things has worked out, as she should be. But with that kind of stuff pushed to the side, it was certainly worth it, just for the lore, just for the background. Any emotional responses I had when I was listening to the audiobook would have been no. But as I was reading this physically, I found myself getting anxious and upset about it, because it's one of those things of, really, just really, as a character, these are the things that you're going to do. You suck as a human. Now let's move on. We should be to the question of the week. This one really doesn't need a question of the week because of the subject matter inside of it. So we'll skip that one. You don't have any homework this time. Congratulations. This is the most interesting comment that we found this week. Oh, and by the way, speaking of comments, there's somebody that made a comment, and I'm going to let it say where it's at, because they did it right. Now, I'm not sure which one of the two videos you will pick that is coming in or should be coming in from over here, but if you happen to pick one of these two right here, I will see you in the next video. Be safe, wash your hands, COVID's out there, don't let it get you. Alright, love you. Bye.